I think I have a stalker at work. Apologies in advance if this isn't the right subreddit. I just need to get it off my chest. Also, I'm in the break room at my job on my cell phone, so grammar and formatting may not be the best. For those of you who don't know, I'm a fairly petite young female. In fact, I'm the youngest assistant manager at this grocery store. I'm also rather petite. In our store, there's a small kiosk that sells cell phones and various services related to that, and there are several different guys who rotate through this kiosk. One in particular, Bob, has weirded me out from the get-go. As soon as training was over, and I started running the front of the store alone, mid-October though, the comments started. Every time I walk by the kiosk, "Hey babe, gorgeous baby cutie, when are you gonna ditch your boyfriend and come date me? I can take you for a ride in my truck, if you know what I mean." He also stared at me whenever he got a chance. It didn't matter if I was in customer service, the pharmacy, at a register, whenever. If I was in the front, he was staring at me. Since about December, it got physical as well. He tried holding my hand, purposefully brushing by me as he walked by, and playing with my hair as I counted registers down at the end of the night. Within the last couple weeks, he's also snuck up behind me and grabbed my waist a couple times, and has gotten close enough that I could feel his breath on the back of my neck. He also started showing up frequently when I'd work. I'd say about 80% of my last shifts, he's been there, staring, skulking. Despite me telling him multiple times to leave me alone, he hasn't gotten the message. And now he's back. I had my back to the doors, and all of a sudden, I felt hands on my waist and lips on my neck. I freaked out and told another supervisor to cover the front, and am hiding in the break room, trying not to cry. He monitored mine and my family's routine for a month and got caught. Before I begin, I'm going to say that I am a 19-year-old man and working a full-time job. I have since moved out of the place and this incident occurred in. What happened took place when I was about 6 years old. I lived in a decent neighborhood. We did have the occasional creepy person that would walk by or bike by. We also had some nice apartment buildings where the people living there were heavy into drugs and didn't bother anyone though. They were nice people to talk to, and frequently mentioned they were into that stuff. They never bothered me, so I didn't care. Now, enough with the background. The house I lived in at that point was a very decent size. My dad also built a garage, a huge garage. Now, this is where what happened, really. The garage was huge. He had enough space for 3 vehicles and rafters on the ceiling for storage of seasonal stuff, Halloween, Christmas, etc. This took place in December. I live in Atlanta, Canada, and in Atlanta, Canada, we get some pretty nasty snowstorms and blizzards. On a day in December, I was being a little kid in the snow, and my dad was working the garage on one of his car projects. He had gotten thirsty and went in the house to get a drink. He came out and asked if I had gone into the garage. I asked why, and he said there's footprints in the snow leading into the garage that didn't think were his. I said no, and we both thought nothing of it. That evening, my dad and I went to bed early. My mom works late and came home late that night and saw some of my toys that were in the rafters stored away were on the garage floor instead. She thought nothing of it, moved them and parked the vehicle in the garage, closed the garage door, went into the house, watched some TV, and went to bed. Now, my dad wakes up at 4 a.m. every morning to be for work at 5 a.m. The garage door was open when my dad woke up so naturally he was angry. Wakes everyone up and goes out to the garage, comes back in and is freaking out. But a lot of very expensive equipment was missing. We called the cops. The outside lights were flicked on, and we saw those same mysterious footprints leading to the garage earlier, leading into the backyard and into the forestry behind the house. The cops searched the garage, and my mom brought up the toys falling from the rafters. The cops asked to borrow a ladder and went up to check. They found a gun, a meat cleaver, 3 condoms, 2 of which were used, assuming he masturbated into them. I did not sleep for a week. I was terrified. They got the guy 2 weeks later trying to sell all my dad's equipment at a pawn shop. He confessed to everything. He said he broke into other houses on our street. He also stated he watched our house for a whole month to learn all of our routines so he wouldn't get caught. He had the weapons in case he did. He said he jerked off into the condoms when he saw my mom. He is currently serving a 15-year prison sentence. I don't want to know what would have happened if my mom, dad, or I had saw him. The man in the cowboy hat. I'm a 20-year-old woman from Pennsylvania. This is the story of my stalker. This is kind of long, but it takes place over about 5 years. I moved into my new house with my mom and 2 younger brothers in the winter of 2000. I was 8 years old. Everything went fine for almost 2 years, but in the summertime of 2002, Bill moved in next door. I thought he was weird. He was tall and always wore this old cowboy hat. He knew my name almost immediately, but knew nothing of my brothers. He called them Jack and Tom, which weren't their names at all. He would invite me into his house for cookies or to watch movies, but I always declined. When I was 12 years old, he came up to our porch and asked if he could give me a Valentine. My mom was creeped out and told him to stay the hell away from me. Then in the spring, he called my unlisted number while my mom was at work. He told me that he saw my dog run out of the house. I was stupid and went outside to look. Bill was out waiting for me and tried to urge me to call the police from his phone. I felt really weird and told him that I would call from mine. As soon as I walked into my house, I saw my dog run down the stairs to greet me. I told my mom and she called the police for the first time. They said there was nothing they could do and told me to stay inside from now on. He scared me so much that I moved across the state to live with my dad for a year. I decided to go to high school at my mom's, so I came back. It was December of my freshman year when things started to get worse. The first thing that happened was that I found a letter in my mailbox with a card and a handwritten note. The note said, "I'm so sorry. I love you." The card was a generic card that you would get someone you loved. It went into details about how he longed to kiss me and hold me in his arms, even though he knew we couldn't be together. I alerted the police again. This time, they told me that he seemed a little off, but in Pennsylvania, there's no such thing as a restraining order. We have protections from abuse, and they're only valid for a lover or a family member. The police officer said to my mom right in front of me, it would have been better if she had been raped. We could do something about it then. My family moved that night, and all was peaceful for a few weeks. Then, my new house started getting hang-up calls from different gas station payphones. They were varied, but I ended up getting about 50 calls in a month and a half. The last of these calls were from a gas station 1 block away from my house. That was the last straw. My mom and stepdad followed him back to my original town, on the phone with the police the entire way. When they reached his house, the police were waiting. They checked his truck and found binoculars, rope, duct tape, and a list of my family members' addresses and phone numbers. He was taken to jail. During the court proceedings, I was too afraid to face him, and he was sentenced to 2 years of probation for stalking. I was 14. He was 53. It's been 6 years now, but every time I have to go back to that town, I get panic attacks. I still have nightmares about the thin man with a cowboy hat coming to take me away. Transphobic coworkers tried to have me arrested and committed. So, I have shared stories about me before on Let's Not Meet, simply because being a paramedic lends to me seeing a whole ton of creepy stuff. But I decided that recent events were a ton more creepier and that I would share them. Not only to give some entertainment at how sad some people are, but to give a shred of what some people go through. Until recently, I worked at a very large children's hospital in the southern US. I am also transgender, present myself as female at work, and identify with my female pronouns and name. I've been doing this for 6 months now openly. if you've kept up with the US politics recently. We're pretty much a target in politics at this point for every nut job who wants to make a name for themselves. My employer started out promising an exclusivity, but since December had become far more toxic and far more hostile, including telling me to never correct anyone who misgenders me and to stop presenting as female at work. I had made an effort to separate myself from several people who had made it their mission in life to harass me for my transition, one of whom had told her director that she would beat the shit out of me if she caught me around her at work. Others had gone so far as to dig up social media and FetLife accounts and spread them around people at work. 6 months of continuous provocation and intrusion in my life had taken a toll, and I had a particularly hard shift one night where I was deliberately mistreated and insulted. I made the mistake of venting about my dysphoria on Facebook and talking about mental illness and depression in EMS. I completed my shift at job A and clocked out and started to go home. I was actually in line to get food for my female partner, and I tried to have a sit down and have dinner with her when I heard my phone ring. It was dispatch, and I figured they thought I might have stayed late to chart, so they were calling us to see if we could take a late transport. They informed me that there was a police officer looking for, and that they need to talk to me regarding a case. The dispatcher found it odd they used my dead name, and even asked why they would know that. Since the officer had threatened to go to my house and arrest me if I didn't come back, I headed back. I made a phone call to my partner to make contact with police friends of ours. Should I not call in an hour? As I pulled in, I immediately noticed things which made me very uneasy. Keep in mind, this is where I worked. Everyone knew me for years, and I was in uniform and presenting as female. This was an unmarked vehicle, not a DUI vehicle, a regular unit, or a field supervisor. Probably investigation or narcotics, based on the way the officer was dressed. As I walked back in, I was directed to the back ER, where this officer awaited me. "Hello, officer, how may I help you? Are you..." My dead name I never go by, not even my legal name. "Yes, I'm... Can I help you?" "Is there someplace private we can talk?" Instant red flag. He wants to isolate me. Sure, let's go out there." I stopped at the elevator. It was a public area well traveled and with a camera. I wanted a witness to what I felt was about to happen. "May I ask what this is about? It's pretty highly irregular. I get called back into work to talk to an investigator." He protested where I was talking to him, and I stood my ground and told him this was fine. I was not comfortable being alone with anyone right now. "I'm gonna be blunt. You have people who are concerned enough about you to call me, and I want to take you somewhere that can help you. Will you let me do that?" At this point, I'm freaking out. Why did this guy think this? Why was he here? I noticed his patches. He's K9. The coworker who said she was going to beat me was married to a K9 cop. It was becoming clear. No, I will not. Am I under arrest? Not at this time. Then I'm exercising my Fourth Amendment right to walk away. This conversation is over. Bye. I turn to move around him. He steps in front of me and puts his hand on his gun. "If you try to leave, I'm arresting you, and you're going to be committed. I can't guarantee you aren't going to kill yourself." I stopped. I actually laughed. Really? This is happening? Let me start by saying, the threat of being sent to our local mental health center for clearance is terrifying enough to me as a trans woman. There are very well-known horror stories about being stripped of dignity, dehumanized, having gender identity invalidated, and someone attempting to convince him he wasn't insane at clearance because of dysphoria. All the horror stories, the feelings of violent threats and poor care, all that came rushing into me. It was clear now what was going on. This guy had tried to get me alone, to give him probable cause to arrest me, and take me to a mental hold. "If you touch me, I will sue the shit out of you and your apartment for violating my rights. I am not suicidal. I'm not going to harm myself or anyone else. I am not under arrest. I'm not going to be set here in my place of employment and have my psychiatric issues with my gender dysphoria treated as if it makes a threat to anyone. You're not a physician. You're not a psychologist. Do not try to diagnose me." I took a step back at this point, wanting to put distance between him and I. This guy staring at me at this point, laughing at me. He easily has a foot of height on me, and is used to intimidating people. At this point, I can see only being led away to cuffs, thrown in a mental hospital, and made to look insane. I'm terrified. Well, if you just admit that you need help for now, you feel, I can take you to people and resources that can help. Why don't you just come with me? He's laughing at this point, sing-songing. There are people starting to watch us, thankfully. Patience and security. He notices this, and becomes increasingly more insistent. My blood is boiling at this point, fear and anger at the same time. I'm getting help. I'm having an attendant physician and psychiatrist treating me for my gender dysphoria. I do not need your help. It's like it's suddenly dawned on him, between his insistence on calling me sir and the fake respect he gave me each time he barked at me to try to intimidate and assert dominance over me. Why are you angry with me? I'm only trying to help you. He feigns concern. I'm angry with the way people treat me. You are a convenient target for that anger, because you are sitting here, calling me suicidal and mentally unstable. I'm sure you understand. It's not personal, right? He shows me a picture. It's a Facebook post where I had openly talked about dysphoria to be an insidious and disgusting thing. How it can make you suicidal and self-loathing. I'm trying to explain dysphoria and what it is, and he's grinning at me, looking at me as if I'm crazy. I finally stop, take a deep breath. I'm not saying any more to you. I want to go home to my partner, enjoy the 6 hours off I have before I have to work job B on a 911 truck. Either arrest me or let me go. I will not consent to you civilly committing me for expressing my feelings. Then look me in the eye and tell me you're not suicidal. I am not suicidal. He should have not been able to have that post. It was restricted view. He finally gives up. He has lost his isolation and is now being witnessed by multiple people. He takes my license and information. As soon as I get my license back, I turn around and walk off. Have a safe night, officer. As I walk back to my car, people can see how furious I am. I'm humiliated, embarrassed, hurt. I'm terrified he's going to follow me, try to arrest me for some trumped-up reason. Had it not been for a paramedic friend talking to me, I had never made it home. I was so scared. The next day, I called to file a report about the incident and complain. There is no record. No call put in dispatch computer, no record or report of any contact with a police officer. He had done this as a personal favor to another K-9 cop, completely off the record, which scared me even more. What if he had taken me? Would have ended up at the hospital for a 24-hour hold? I have since resigned from my job, and I'm working for a more inclusive and tolerant company, but I had to end up flagging my home address for swatting with the local police department due to someone repeatedly calling in false armed party and suicidal individual calls to my residence for the next week. The basement door. This happened to me in late December of 2007 when I was about 8 years old. It was probably one of the most horrific moments of my entire life. Well, to start off, it was Christmas time. I remember getting up early and opening my presents with my parents and my twin sister. One of my presents was a Simpsons movie figurine combo set. It was basically a set of character figurines from The Simpsons. It also contained The Simpsons movie. Now, before you say anything about an 8-year-old watching The Simpsons, I'll have you know, my dad was a complete fan of the series. He literally brought every season and volume of it, and we would watch together. Fast forward 2 nights, I believe this occurred December 27th. I can't really remember crystal clear on what happened that day, but I can only remember the events that occurred at night. My parents had put us to bed, and for some reason, me and my sister could not sleep. Since I couldn't sleep, I snuck into her room to talk and play with toys. Now I got pretty late past our bedtime, about maybe 11:45 a.m. Soon me and my sister got bored. I remember her having the idea to go into my parents' room and crash there and watch the Simpsons movie on their TV. We both agreed it would be a great idea considering that we knew they were deep sleepers and they snored. We also knew they wouldn't mind us sleeping in their room, so me and my sister turned off all the lights in our rooms and headed for our parents. The most prominent thing I can remember that night was how cold it was. At the time, we lived in an old Victorian house that did not have AC. Another thing I remember is how eerily pitch black it was when we turned off all the lights before entering the long hallway. I was not a big fan of the dark back then. In fact, I had trouble sleeping in my room, let alone that I had the light on. When we entered our parents' room, we turned on the TV and set up the movie. I brought my blankets and got bundled in. About 45 minutes into the movie, I heard the basement door downstairs slam shut. Now, our basement door is pretty thick and heavy. It takes a lot of force to slam. I remember just sitting, still full of fear and terror, and having that uneasy feeling in your stomach. I felt like a deer that had seen headlights. After the door slammed, I heard footsteps come down the hall. They sounded like a pair of heavy-set boots. Me and sister just sat still. Then the footsteps came nearer the stairs that led upstairs. As soon as you come upstairs, the first room you would see would be my parents. So if this person came upstairs, the first room they would probably walk in was the room we were in. After that, I heard nothing. It felt like me and my sister were just laying there for hours. What really unnerved me most was that I heard footsteps. No door opening or closing, including that they exited the house. I then remember grabbing the remote and turning off the TV and hiding off the sheets. It took me a while, but I finally fell asleep. The next morning, me and my sister told my parents about it, and they didn't believe us. They just shrugged it off as simply as they left it ajar or the wind pushed it open or something like that. To this day, I cannot explain the events of what happened that night, but I know someone came in and was there. So, home intruder with the big boots. Let's not meet. Hey kid, can you open the door? So, I've been creeping around the subreddit and made this account just to tell the story. So here it goes. I'm 13 years old now, and this happened 2 years ago, and I've shared this with a few people, my family, and some of my close friends. It was in December at the time, and in Straya, it gets so hot that you can leave an egg on the road. It'll just cook in a few minutes. I was sitting down on the couch, which was on the balcony, and was talking with two of my friends, Johnson, 11, and Kyle, 14. We knew each other quite well, because we all lived near a park where we would go to every day. My mother and father were at work, and we were being supervised by Johnson's mother, whose house was opposite of mine. Johnson's mother would check up on us every 30 minutes or so. So, there we were, sitting, when we see a minivan pull up in front of my house. It was considerably old. It was sort of a dim gray color, and we could see that the windows were tinted black. The front, the sides, and the back windows as well. My guts were telling me to run back in, and I sort of just stared at the van, while Johnson and Kyle were talking about some sort of game. They were talking for about 5 minutes when we heard the car door open. Kyle and Johnson stopped and twitched their heads towards the view of the car. Out stepped a man with sweatpants, leather gloves, and a black jacket. He looked like he was between his 30s and 40s, and looked like he was Arabian. He stared at us for a minute or so, and so did we. He killed the silence by asking us, "Hey kids, could you open the door for me?" He had a grin on his face, not a friendly one, but a sinister-looking one. We didn't expect his English to be so fluent. We grew up in a neighborhood of stereotypes. I looked back at the boys, and they looked back at me. Dumbstruck, I replied, "What do you want?" in my best Caucasian accent. Mind you, my English pronunciation was not the best, and has improved significantly. He then said, "I have a package to deliver at this address." As far as I knew, we didn't even have a computer back then, so my spider senses were tingling. "To who is this delivered to?" They didn't give a name. All they gave me was an address. At this point, my body was getting chills all over. "Could you open the door for me to put the package in?" "No, I need a confirmation, please." At this point, he was fed up with an 11-year-old kid asking him stupid questions and tried to force his way through the door. We only had one lock on that door. I looked back at my friends and they started going, shouting, "Hurry up! We need something if he comes up!" We rushed to the kitchen and picked up the home phone. Kyle dialed 000 while Johnson and I were trying to lock the kitchen cabinet to the knives. We ran up to my room and locked the door. Kyle still on the phone with the operator. My room had a crappy lock that would last only a few bumps until it broke. I grabbed my cricket bats and handed up to my friends and I. Stupid as it sounds, I hid on top of the piece of wood that was above my door. So Johnson and Kyle were at the furthest point from the door. At that point, we heard the door open. We were all gone pale, and I don't know what was going through my head. I didn't know what was going through theirs either. This is where the most unbelievable and badass thing happened. We were there for 5 minutes or so until we heard loud thumping on the door. We knew he was trying to break inside. It occurred to me that I had a mix of fear and adrenaline, knowing that if we failed now, we could die. My lips were dry, and I had tears flowing out of my eyes, thinking about my family and how much I love them. The door burst open, and I remember like it was yesterday, the fear, sadness, desperation, and adrenaline that was pumping through my blood. As soon as I saw his whole head, I jumped off and hit his head midway through the jump. He fell down, rubbing his head, while Johnson came with a piercing scream, and then we started beating him with the bats. He dropped the box and hightailed it out of the house to the van, and so did we. During the chase, we were all cursing all the words we knew and tried to catch up with him as fast as we could. He got into the van and got out of there as fast as possible. Johnson's mom heard the noise and came to us. We told her what had happened. The police came a few minutes later, and we explained everything. We didn't catch him or anything, but we had the box he had left behind. We found duct tape, string, and a kitchen knife inside. The police couldn't do anything as we had so little information, and only the box he left behind. The police offered a month of protection in case he came back. 2 years later, we brag about how he beat the guy up, while Kyle did nothing but call the police and hid in the corner of the room. We all did have a great laugh about it, even Kyle himself. But this was a truly scarring event, and we don't take it too far, for the sake of all of us. No article or story have been released about this, and whenever we're alone again, Johnson's mom is always in the house. He had no idea what to do. I want to start off with a little bit of background information. At the time of this encounter, I was 14 years old. I am now 18, and it still freaks me out when I talk about it. I am a guy, and though I'm not the most intimidating with appearance-wise, I am not easily pushed around. So I live with my mom, dad, my brother, who is at the time 10 years old, and my dog, who is a border collie. My house is supposed to be 2 flats, but we both bought and turned it into a house, so it has 2 doors that can easily be accessed, as we used the back door so we could let my dog out into the garden. It was a late night in December of 2011, and my brother Tom and I were home alone, as my mom and dad were both out at a friend's Christmas party. Being an obnoxious teenager, I refused to go, because it would be boring, but now I wish I did. Me and Tom were upstairs in my house playing the PS3 like usual, and it got to around 9 p.m., and I heard something fall downstairs. We normally lock my dog in the back room, with this night no exception. Thinking it was just my dog, I brushed it off as nothing. That was until I heard my dog growl. I've never heard him growl as loud as he did that night. This sent alarm bells ringing in my head. I got up and walked to the top of my stairs to see if I could see anything at all. As soon as I got to the top, I instantly froze. My front door was wide open. I stood there. I just couldn't move even if I wanted to. This is when it gets even creepier. I was just about ready to run and call the police when a man, in full black gear, walked into my house and immediately stared at me. It felt like an eternity. Me, being a 14-year-old boy, standing inches away from a 6-foot-plus guy inside my house, just staring at each other. That's when he began to talk. He tried to engage in a friendly conversation. It went along the lines of, "Hi, is this your house?" "Yes." "I like your dog, he seems nice." "Thank you." "Where are your parents?" I didn't reply. "So, What I want you to do is go in the bathroom and lock the door." "Why?" As he was about to say something, I heard sirens come from up the street. The man hesitates and goes to run out the door when he looks back at me and says, "You did not see anything, got that?" I nodded my head, and then he just left. Moments later, the police come running through my door and immediately begin to ask me questions like if I was alright and is the man still here. I just couldn't speak. I was just so shocked at what had happened in the space of a few minutes. A little later that night, I found out that a man, Bob, who knows my parents, who was waiting for the bus outside my house, had spotted the man enter my house multiple times. He contacted the police about this, until he just stood at my door. That is when Bob knew something was off, and ushered the police to arrive soon. They have never caught the man who did this, and from my encounter with him, all I could tell about was that he was fairly large and spoke an extremely deep tone. The man never stole anything from my living room. It just leaves questions on what he was actually looking for. It's fair to say that my parents vowed to never leave the house without us again. The thing that still haunts me is, what if I never got up to look around? He could have just easily walked up the stairs and straight into my bedroom. Nothing else has ever happened. I, or anyone in the neighborhood, had never seen the man again. But you know what? I never want to meet him again. Stop signs mean stop. This happened in December of 2011 in one of the suburbs of Dallas, Texas. I was riding back from seeing a late-night shadowcast of Rocky Horror with two of my friends. We lived in a suburb of Fort Worth, and for some reason, we had to pull off of the highway going home and go through a residential neighborhood before getting back on the highway. I think we were avoiding a toll road or something like that. Rachel was driving, I was in the passenger seat, and Hannah was in the passenger side backseat, and had been reminding us for the past half hour that she needed to pee. Rachel commented that she was just going to go through the stop sign like normal, but I reminded her of her many tickets and insisted that she just stop. I turned in my seat to tell Hannah we were almost to a gas station when some guy proceeded to crash into our car, not with his car, but literally slammed his body as hard as he could against Hannah's window. We all screamed simultaneously, and Rachel stomped her foot on the pedal and drove off. I think we did about 80 through that neighborhood until we pulled back onto the highway. After we got back to my place, we were comforted by my parents. We asked Hannah if she saw anything about the guy. She was unsure, but said it looked like he had a beard, and his face was what slammed against her window. Rachel called the cops and told them what happened, as well as how there was literally blood on her window from the crazy dude. It was a pretty impressive blood stain, but probably at most came from him bashing his nose against the glass. We never really heard anything about it again. So, crazy stop sign, dude. Let's not meet. Clap, clap. This happened to me just last year, around December. I was walking home from work to my apartment. It's around 5 then, so it's still fairly bright outside, so I didn't really feel threatened. There's usually lots of kids playing along the streets to my apartment, but back then it was a bit empty, save from a pair of old ladies hanging about their fence, chatting and gossiping stuff. When I got further down the street, I saw a guy sitting just at the side of the pavement. I didn't mind him at first, but when I got closer, he stood up and he started walking towards me. On instinct, I got out of his way, avoiding him. He stopped for a second when we were just arm's length away from each other. He then clapped 2 times, then walked away like nothing happened. I started to get scared then. I walked faster, grabbing my keys and ready myself, just in case I need to throw punches or run away. When I got to the end of the street, I saw 3 men just hang out beside an apartment building on the other side of the road. I stared at them for a bit, kept eye contact until I turned left towards my own apartment building, further down ways. Then I took my eyes off of them for a second. When I looked back, I saw them preparing to cross the road to my side, and in that instant, my blood ran cold. I realized the guy who clapped earlier just alerted these three that I was near. They prepared for this, and that scared me the most. The street was empty. If I was attacked, who'd help me? I kept looking back at them, and their eyes are still on me. The three of them now crossing the road. I didn't trust myself to run then. I felt like I'd tripped if I did. Thankfully, a car came and turned the corner towards us, and they stopped midway right in the middle of the street. The car beeped at them, and they stepped back to their side of the road. They were still looking at me when I started power walking away. One of them was talking and gestured at me, and I didn't give a fuck about anything at that point. I just half ran, half walked away, while making sure they weren't following me anymore. I couldn't properly insert my key in the lock at first when I got to my door, because my hand was shaking so badly. All the self-defense moves I know, all the precautions, I forgot all of it because I was so scared. When I got inside, I locked my door immediately and sat for a bit beside the windows, watching if they came to follow me. Luckily for me, they gave up the chase. Since then, I started to build my courage to face these kind of situations, but since I still cannot properly defend myself, Clap Guy and those three dudes, let's not meet again. Garage. It was about 6 years ago when I was 8 or 9 years old. I lived in Monmouth County, New Jersey, a quiet county with local bands and a beach, but that was in the summertime. It was a cold December night. My Gramps was asleep in his chair. My nanny was watching the news, and my mom was out drinking in a bar somewhere in Belmar. The TV began to flicker, along with the kitchen lights. The house was old, so I wasn't worried. Stuff like this happened a lot. My nanny sighed, and she asked me to go check the breaker down in the basement. That basement always scared me. There was no reason, it just felt so eerie to me. I shivered and nodded, not wanting my tipsy grandmother angry. I stood from my place on the floor. I held my plush bunny, and I walked down to the basement and opened up the breaker. Everything seemed to be fine, but I heard shuffling coming from the garage above me. The house technically had 4 floors: garage, basement, main floor, and the bedroom floor. We also had 2 cats, and we had to leave the garage door open slightly so our cats could get in, being that it was only 6 p.m. and the sun had just set. We figured we could still leave the garage door opened. I figured the shuffling was my cat, Sans, and I turned and walked to the old wooden door when I suddenly heard the sound of golf clubs being shaken. Little autistic me clutched her bunny. I opened the door only to see the man my mother had been dating, with my bike over his shoulder. "Hey!" I shouted. "That's mine!" I growled. I hated the man anyway. I figured he was trying to replace my father and it pissed me off. I ran over and I bit him. He dropped the bike and I heard bells jingling from the door that led to the garage. My nanny had gotten worried because I was gone for so long. I ceased my biting and moved towards my nanny. She looked pissed and she glared at him, telling him to stay away. The next morning, my mom was hungover and sleeping on the couch. I came downstairs and she began to wake up. I told her about what had happened, and she swallowed hard. "Alex, I never told you, but Louise is a stalker and a rapist. My best friend Philip knew him for years. Just last night he told me there was a warrant out for his arrest. I was confused. I knew that my Uncle Ben had been arrested, but what was a stalker? I asked her just that and she told me. This freaked me out because, lately, I felt someone watching me sleep. I began to cry and I no longer went into that basement alone after dark. To this day, I never go down in that garage or basement. It scares me too much." Fearful girl. It was my last week of high school of my senior year. This happened 3 years ago when I was 17 years old. One day I was going to my bus stop, which is located behind the high school. The street of the bus stop always seemed creepy to me, but I took the bus there for 4 years, and nothing ever happened, so I used to go to the stop alone. One day, I was going there as usual when I saw a man coming in my way. In order to understand the story, you need to know that I am, and I've always been a really fearful girl. My friends used to mock me, and they still do, of how fearful I am. Anyways, I was walking when I saw a man coming in my direction. We were walking on the same sidewalk. He seemed creepy to me when I first saw him from a distance. He didn't look homeless, but was really messy. I got a little scared, but tried to ignore it. I did not want to cross the street to the other sidewalk, just because he looked messy. It was too rude, and besides, I was about to arrive to the bus stop and he was going the opposite direction, so he was going to pass by me. So I kept walking. When we crossed each other, he stopped. I kept walking and I saw him following me a few steps back. I thought that maybe he realized that he was going the wrong direction, I don't know. I was trying my best not to get scared. When I arrived to the stop, he stood there too. I was scared, but it was broad daylight, and there were plenty of people in the stop, so I decided not to get scared. A bus that wasn't mine came, and all the people that was in the stop left, so I was alone with him. He waited a few seconds and he approached me. He was a fit man, but he seemed to be between 35 and 40. He asked me if I had the time. When he came close, I got really scared, so when he asked me if I had the time, I told him no. And in the same second, I turned around and started walking back to the school. I didn't look back and walked fast. When I was returning to the school, I was a little guilty. I mean, he was just a man who asked me the time, right? And I basically didn't tell him and just ran away, but for some reason I was not comfortable with him, alone. When I arrived at the school, I saw a few friends and told them what I had done, and they laughed at the fact that I ran away from a guy who just wanted to know the time. I stayed with my friends for about 30 to 45 minutes, and decided it was safe to go to the stop. When I got out of the high school, I saw the man standing on the sidewalk looking at the high school door. I couldn't believe my eyes. I froze there, and he was just staring at me. He was standing under the sun in one of the most hot December days, just staring at me. I went back inside. I told my friends. They went with me to the main entrance, and they saw him too. They couldn't believe how he was just staring at me. The main entrance of the school is located in a huge sidewalk, so I was standing in the door, and he was 20 meters away. We stayed there with my two friends waiting for him to leave for about 20 minutes. He not only didn't leave, he was still staring at me. The doorman of the school is the one you go to if you have a problem like that. We waited for the doorman in the entrance of the school, but he never showed up. So I went and told the receptionist what was going on. She went with me and my friends to the door, and when the man saw her, he began immediately walking across the street. He stood there across the street looking back at me. The receptionist told me to wait for the doorman and she left. But the frickin' doorman didn't arrive. We waited a bit more, and he was there, still, with his eyes locked on me. A few minutes later, a few male friends appeared, and I told them what was going on. They stayed with me for a few minutes, and saw him standing there, frozen, staring at me. They wanted to face him and tell him to go away, but I was too scared, so I didn't let them. We stood there for maybe half an hour more, and finally the man left. He walked looking at me until I couldn't see him anymore, but he went in the direction of the bus stop, so my friends went with me to another stop. The other day I told a few teachers, and they made me talk to the principal. He made me speak with another man who apparently was hired for the kids' safety. He told me he used to be a cop. I had to tell the cop all the stories, and he made me a lot of questions. I was a little ashamed, because the man didn't actually do anything bad to me. I mean, he was creepy as hell, but he didn't do anything. I wasn't that scared of the creepy man until the cops started asking me what I was wearing, how I was wearing my hair. I was wearing the Catholic school uniform, the skirt, and the white shirt. When I told the man description, he told me that they had seen him around for the last month, going around the high school in the exit time. He asked me not to go alone to the stop in the following days, and told me to contact him immediately if I saw him again. I'm going to be 100% honest, maybe I was too naive, but I didn't think he was going to do anything but steal my phone or my money or something. It wasn't until later that I realized the whole situation I might have escaped from. I don't know what would have happened, but I never saw him again. Washington, D.C. scare. This may not be that scary, but it really freaked us out. Several years ago, my friend Kayla and I went from Florida to D.C. to visit another dear friend of ours, Heather. Heather had moved from Florida to D.C. not too long before we made the trip. We stayed at a nice hotel near one of the subway stops, not far from Navy Yard. We were all young professionals, 22 at the time, and wanted to just have a girls' weekend. None of us are familiar with DC, especially Navy Yard area, and asked the front desk at the hotel for some places to have a few drinks. The front desk was staffed by a man in his late 30s, who seemed very nice. He told us to walk towards Navy Yard a few blocks and take a left. There are some bars there that are nice. Mind you, we visited in early December, and we were all native Floridians, so we were bundled up in pea coats, mittens, etc. It was about 9 p.m. when we decided to head out towards the bars. We start walking, complaining of the cold while looking around. As we get a little closer to the outskirts of Navy Yard, we all start noticing it is getting a little more desolate as we continue our trek. Finally, we hear some sounds of life. Nightlife, we made it. We get to the point where we're supposed to make a left, and we all hesitate and look at each other. It's basically the ghetto. Here we are, 3 young out-of-towners in the midst of what seemed to be a small alley of gay clubs. A bouncer notices that we're out of place. He yells to us, "What y'all looking for? What you looking for?" Heather shouts back, "Nothing, we're fine." We decide to cut our losses and return to the hotel by making a square around the block so we don't give the bouncer any evidence that we walked there just to turn around. We pass the clubs, just really sketchy hole-in-the-wall places, and start talking about what the hell the front desk guy was thinking, sending us down there. Did we follow his directions wrong? There were no other spots for us to have possibly missed, but we let it go and start thinking of another plan for the night. Cue strange man coming towards us talking to himself. We are a few blocks from him, but can hear gibberish and tell he's probably just a homeless guy making his nightly rounds. If only. He looks up and yells something incoherent. We are walking faster so that we can reach the street to make another left and avoid having to cross paths with him. As we're maintaining a speed walk, he yells again, loudly, "Hey!" Oh crap. "Hey! I see you, stop!" Nope, definitely not stopping. We're trying to play it cool. Walk even faster, and just lose this dude. "Hey! FBI! CIA! I see you, stop!" Oh god, what the hell is this dude talking about? We finally made the turn, and are able to square back to our original street that is a little more well lit, but still no people or traffic. My heart rate is up, but we're kind of laughing about this whole situation. Then all of a sudden he's back. "Hey, girls, stop! FBI, CIA!" Our heart drops and we start speedwalking. Kayla is latching onto my arm and saying she's scared. Heather and I keep our heads up and just tell her to walk as fast as she can. Kayla starts jogging a little to try and keep up. I'm 5'10", 5'11". Heather is maybe 5'8", while Kayla is probably 5'5". Heather and I both tell her to not run for fear of the man starting to chase us. He continues yelling, and finally picks up his pace to try and catch us. Finally, we made it close enough to the subway stop for there to be people around. I slow down and turn to see who the guy is, but he's already turned back around headed where he came from. We go back to the hotel and reflect on the ridiculous situation. We probably all overreacted, but I was not sure what this guy wanted, and definitely not want to get close enough to find out. Fortunately, I have never been followed before that, but holy crap, was it scary. Last year when the Navy Yard shooting took place, we all kind of jokingly said, it was probably that crazy guy that followed us.